Well. It's time to do that little introduction video that I promised you earlier today. I said 2 minutes and time got away. You know, the grandbaby showed up. Now see, quite a few of you already know the story about my voice and where I'm from, but some of you are new. That's what happens when you lose an account and you have to start another account. You end up on people's FYPs and they see you for the first time, so they know none of your histories. So firstly, I am Southern. Yes, baby, I'm a very Southern woman. I walk in the room with cornbread in one hand and consequences in the other. And trust me, only one is good with butter. But either way, no, I do not sound like this in my everyday life. If you were to meet me on the street, or you were my friend and we talked on a daily, this is how I would sound. Now, as you can see, the tone is still the same. It's still low, deep, and sweet. And it's still country. There's still an accent there. But as far as this accent, well, it's not made up. It does come from family, and I will explain. Prior to the election, when I was doing videos, I used my regular voice. This one, right here. And still in the comment section every day, people would tell me that I sounded like a sugar baker. Or Clary. Or Blanche Devereaux, or Roz from Frasier, you know, that deep, low voice. After the election, all the news was not palatable, not digestible. It didn't really matter who you got your news from. It didn't really matter what they were saying. It was not tasty. It left you feeling bad after you left the video. So I was trying to think of a way that I could still do my content, still say what I needed to say, but would make it easier to hear, a way to make it pleasant to the ear, and also add a bit of comedy into that. And it made me think of my aunties, my grandmother's sisters in particular. She was from a very large family, very large. I do believe there were 13 children altogether, and only 2 were boys. 2 boys. Baby. Now, she was the youngest of all 13, so there were some that I never met. They passed away before I was ever born. But I grew up with 8 of them in my life. Now, when they got married as young ladies, they moved all over the South. Some stayed in Alabama, some moved to Mississippi, Tennessee, Texas, Georgia, the Carolinas, every state. I don't think there's a state in the South that I don't have family in. Now, I was the firstborn child in my family and the firstborn grandchild, so I went everywhere with my grandmother. And a few times a year, we would go up to North Alabama, where Great Granny lived, and all get together and hang out for a week or so. We did this constantly, at least 5 to 8 times a year. And they would all get up, all the sisters. We'd get up about 4 in the morning, and they'd go sit around the coffee table and the kitchen table, having coffee and spilling tea and making biscuits and breakfast. And when I say spilling tea, these ladies had stories to tell about everybody in the South. Now, my Aunt Lou in particular is the one that I sound the most like when I put this voice on. Yes, this is how Aunt Lou sounded. But Aunt Nell, who lived in Texas, she sounded this way too. But she did hers a little bit more like this because she thought she was highfalutin. She married a rich man and moved to Dallas. And that was the dream back in the day. If you lived in the South, to end up in Dallas, baby. She would ride into town in her convertible Cadillac with her Neiman Marcus bags and fur coats like something special, baby. Highfalutin, as my granny would say. And Aunt Janie was down here on the Gulf Coast, close to Louisiana, and spent a lot of her time in Louisiana. So hers had a little bit of that Kathy Bates, water boy twang on it. And then, of course, you had the Aunt Ray, who spent a little bit of time in Georgia, and some of her family stayed there in Georgia, too. And, well, theirs was a little bit slower and lower, and kind of like this, you know. Almost Atlantic, if you get what I'm saying. And they would say the most crazy, crazy things. But it always sounded good when they said it. It don't matter what they was talking about. They could have been talking about a baby having leukemia, and somehow you left the conversation and felt okay about it. And they always had jokes to tell. They were sneaky with their tea. Like, say, for instance, they found out that Bill was cheating on Betty with May, instead of saying Bill was cheating on Betty with May, they'd say something like this. You know, Bill's been down there cutting Betty's grass at least 3 times this week, and I didn't know grass could grow that fast. And then the other sister would chime in and say, well, I heard Betty's been going to bed with Prince Valium at least 3 nights a week, too. No way. What do you say? And as far as Lou, she's been on the brew. And that was it. That was it. I knew right there. So it's an homage to my aunties and their tea stories. Baby, the things they would say. Oh, my God. I'll have to get back to some of their stories to tell y'all, because they had stories, honey. One of my uncles, in fact, of the 2. Now, one was Austin and one was Houston. As you can tell, my great-granny had a fascination with Texas, too, because she only had 2 boys, and she named them Austin and Houston. Now, Austin was in the closet the entirety of his life, and that was kind of something nobody in the family talked about, but they would joke about it all the time. Like Lou would say, you know, Austin's had that handyman over there quite a few days. Is his air conditioner low on Freon? Wink, wink. And that would upset my grandmother. She never liked them talking out of turn about their brother. Never at all. And she'd say, y'all quit picking on him. Y'all know he ain't that way. That he does not have sugar in his loafers. Quit saying that about our brother. And Aunt Janie would chime in and say, look, that boy's got more sugar in his loafers than the field has cane, honey. So that's just a little peek in to where I get some of my attitude, my sass, and, well, my accent. And just as a point of note, almost all the women in my family have a deep tone, honey. My mother's sister, Lavette, baby, she came out the womb, sounded like she was born with a cigar in her mouth and whiskey in her hand. Now, there's another thing I want to talk about that gets addressed a lot in my comment section. People say, why is she trying to sound like a black woman? And my response to that is, accents come from places, not from races. So when you think in your mind that only a certain skin color of a people can sound a certain way, baby, that's a racist thing to say. I mean, look at Idris Elba, honey. That dark chocolate bunny. How does he sound? Like where he's from? You know, with a British accent, hon. I mean, come on. So now that we've addressed that, and I get, by the way, let's circle on back for a second. One of the reasons that this accent seems so much more only to a black woman and no one else is because of the reason why people who don't talk like this from the South think that I have made up an entire accent that did not exist and that no one in the South talks like this. It's all tied together, you see, and that would be because of Hollywood. That's right. Now, if you look at some of the Hollywood and radio programs prior to the 50s, a lot of the Southern accents are like this. And every time you've seen a black woman on screen back in the day, this is how she sounded, because this is the original Southern accent. It's the closest thing to an actual British-type UK dialect. Yes, this is how we originally spoke in the South, until Hollywood thought it would be much more profitable to make everybody in the South look like a dummy. They couldn't say words like proclivity or egregious or erroneous. No. They needed people in the South to talk more like this and sound more like this because it was funny. Hee-haw. Hee-haw. So thanks to the influence of fucking TV and shit, and radio and music and fucking Hollywood, everybody in the South talks like this now. And this accent has went away. But you know who was not influenced by that back in the day? Beautiful black women. That's who. That's why you will still find quite a few who sound like this. The original Southern tone. Particularly if you're in Louisiana. And they still talk this way. Well, I hope that helps.